This chapter is lease negotiations, and we're going to talk about, first of all, qualifying a tenant. The first thing that we want to do, anytime that we show a property, particularly a residential property, we want to fill out what we call a visitor registration. The purpose of the visitor registration is to document the contact that we had with the individual. We do this for twofold. Number one, we want to cover ourselves so that we have some record of the contact in case some accusation or something at another time should come up in regard to this contact. For instance, if somebody said that that we discriminated against them in some form or fashion during this process, we would have at least some record of our contact with this person. So that's the first reason. The second reason is so that for marketing purposes we can contact them later. For instance, if they're looking for a particular residential property that we don't have available at that time, we put that on the visitor registration. Then we can contact them later should that become available. So for marketing reasons, then that gives us the opportunity to contact them in the future. Okay, so let's assume that now we have they're interested. We've showed them, they filled out the visitor registration, and they want to go to the next step. The next step that we would go to is the lease application. The lease application is the real key for us to analyze and qualify this tenant to see if they are a fit to lease to. The first thing on that is the identity. There's a lot of different types of forms that we could fill out in order to do this lease application. There's a lot of them available. But the main thing we want to achieve there, number one, is their identity. We want to get a copy of their ID. We want to get the driver's license number. We want to make sure that they are in the country legally or they are documented in some way, and we want to understand that relationship. The next thing we want to do is we want to get a rental history. Where have they been? Now, we want this thing to not have gaps, and that's what we're going to analyze and look for gaps in their residency somewhere. So we want to look at their rental history. They'll also give us the names, the phone numbers, and permission to contact these people in case we want to do that. So the next thing is financial status. What is their income? How much debt do they have? And that sort of thing. So these are the types of things that we want to look at in the evaluation on the lease application. The next thing that we talk about in this chapter is terms, negotiating terms. And the book talks about working with others, cooperating brokers, the roles of attorneys. And so I'll allow you to read that and take a look at that so that you'll understand the role in cooperating brokers. We also talk about security deposits in this particular chapter. Every state is going to have a different policy in regard to security deposits. I can tell you in the state of Oklahoma, you have 30 days to return a security deposit. If you keep any part of the security deposit, you have to document that in a letter to the tenant saying why you kept any part of their security deposit. This chapter spends a lot of time talking about concessions and types of concessions that you might want to provide or you may have to provide in order to get tenancy of your property. Anytime you consider concessions, you need to think about what effect it has on the value of the property. We're going to learn later on that value is a function of rent or income. So anything that we do to impact that income is going to have an effect on the value of that property. So any concession that we give, we want to try to have as little impact as we can on the impact. So there are a lot of good stuff in this lecture and in this chapter, in this module, regarding concessions on which ones you should and should not provide. So I'll let you take a look at that. Some of the choices are rents, concessions, length of lease period, free rent. Some people give a month's free rent so that they don't have to have a reduction in actual rent per month. Tenant alterations, or what we call tenant improvements. That might be a concession that one might make, particularly in a commercial application. Expansion options. So there are a lot of concessions that you might think about. You may want to help them by deferring their moving expenses, by paying some of their moving expenses. You may want to pay the last months of the rent of where they're at to get them to move in early. You may allow them to allow an assumption or subletting clause in their lease. So all these kinds of things are things that you might consider in giving concessions in order to get tenancy. Then the chapter is wrapped up talking about prospect hesitancy and sales techniques, closing techniques, and follow-up. If you have any issues, again, just please let me know. Thank you very much.